What if we could fight climate change not with these giant, complex machines, but with microscopic, purpose-built ecosystems? That's pretty much the core idea behind the GeneCapsule blueprint. It's a totally new proposal for how we tackle carbon emissions. So let's break it down. Okay, so before we can really appreciate any new solution, you gotta wrap your head around the sheer scale of the problem. This number right here, 40 billion tons. That's roughly how much carbon dioxide we as humanity are pumping into the atmosphere every single year. It is a staggering figure, and it really sets the stage for everything we're about to talk about. And that leads us to this really critical question, right? Are we just gonna keep tweaking the old methods, or is there a truly new way forward? Well, the GeneCapsule blueprint argues for a fundamental shift in how we approach this whole thing. So, to really get a handle on this, we've got to start with what the blueprint calls the carbon equation. This is all about making sure we understand the absolute core of the challenge before we start jumping into solutions. The heart of the issue is actually pretty simple, but incredibly difficult. Our entire global economy, the way we build things, the way we travel, how we power our lives, it's all deeply, fundamentally tangled up with processes that release CO2. And trying to untangle that, well, that's the central challenge. Okay, so with the problem clearly defined, let's move on to the proposal itself. This is where the blueprint introduces this really fascinating new concept, something it calls the gene capsule. So what in the world is a gene capsule? Well, in the simplest terms, think of it like a tiny, self-contained biological factory. The real magic is what's inside. Genetically optimized microorganisms, maybe a type of algae or some specialized bacteria that have been engineered for one very specific job, to literally eat CO2 right out of the air. It's carbon capture, but it's using life itself to do the work. And this quote from the blueprint, it just perfectly sums up the whole idea. Forget about gears and factories and smokestacks. They want us to imagine this tiny, self-sufficient ecosystem whose whole purpose for existing is to consume carbon. It's a really powerful and, honestly, a memorable way to picture it. So that's the big concept, but how would it actually work in the real world? Let's walk through the mechanics of how these little capsules would go from just sitting there to actually capturing carbon. The whole process is laid out in 4 pretty distinct stages. It all starts with deployment. You distribute the capsules in strategic, high-emission zones. Then comes activation. See, they just lie dormant until an environmental trigger, like sunlight or even just moisture in the air, wakes them up. That kicks off the most important part, carbon capture, where those hungry little microbes inside just start rapidly absorbing CO2. And finally, you have sequestration. This is where that captured carbon gets converted into a stable, inert biomass, basically a solid, harmless organic material, which locks it away for good, right there inside the capsule. Okay, so that's the how, but the really big question is how much? What kind of impact could a technology like this actually have on our global emissions? Let's take a look. Take a look at this chart from the blueprint. It paints a pretty dramatic picture. On the left, you see our current emissions trajectory, where we're headed now. But that bar on the right, that shows the projected path with the GeneCapsule's blueprint in the mix. The potential drop is significant, and it really showcases the kind of scale this solution is aiming for. Now, this is a super important point. The blueprint is really clear that gene capsules aren't meant to be some kind of silver bullet. The goal is to create a powerful new tool for our climate toolkit, something that works alongside things like renewable energy and other reduction efforts, so we can tackle the problem from multiple angles at once. And it's not just about capturing carbon. The blueprint points out a few other really interesting potential benefits. For one, because the capsules are small and you can spread them out, you get decentralized carbon capture. You're not relying on one massive, expensive facility. This could also mean using way less land compared to, say, large-scale reforestation efforts. And finally, that captured carbon becomes a stable biomass, which could potentially be repurposed. You could literally turn a problem into a valuable resource. This is, without a doubt, a seriously ambitious idea. So, what's the plan? How do you get from a concept on paper to something that actually works in the real world? What does that path forward look like? Well, the blueprint lays out a very clear, methodical roadmap. It all starts small, with lab-scale prototypes in the first year. By year 3, the goal is to move to contained field trials. From there, a pilot program deployment around year 5, all leading up to a full-on assessment of its scalability within about a decade. It's a long-term, step-by-step vision. And all of this leaves us with one final, much bigger question. I mean, the gene capsule is just one idea, but it points to a broader shift in thinking. Could blueprints like this one, inspired by biology, not just traditional engineering, be the key to fundamentally reshaping our entire approach to climate technology? It's definitely something to think about.